Hello, we are Show Me How to Live, and this is Show Me How to Live. In the early dawn, moving right along, I couldn't get a night full of sleep, yeah. And in the aching night under satellite, you were not received. Made from stolen parts, a telephone to my heart. Someone get me a piece. Lay me down to bed. This ringing in my head. Is this the cure or is it the disease? Down in my head from my creator. You gave me your life. Now show me how to live. Down in my head from my creator. You gave me your life. Now show me how to live. In the afterbirth of the quiet earth, let the sun remind you. You thought you made the man. You better think again before my role defines you. Down in my head from my creator, you gave me a life. Now show me how to live. Down in my head from my creator, you gave me a life. Now show me how to live. In your waiting hand I will land and roll under your skin. And in your final hour I will land ready to begin. 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 Down in my head from my creator, you gave me life. Now show me how to live. Down in my head from my creator, you gave me life. Now show me how to live. 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 Thank you. This next one is Like a Stone. by freeway. I confess I was lost in the pages of a book full of death, reading how we'll die alone. And if you're good, you let her rest anywhere you wanna go. In your house, I long to be roam by roam, patiently. I'll wait for you there, like a stone. I'll wait for you there alone. On my deathbed, I will pray to the gods and angels like a pagan. Anyone who will take me to heaven, to a place I recall. I was there so long ago. The sky was bruised, and it was there that you led me on. In your house, I long to be roam by roam, patiently. I will wait for you there, like a stone. I'll wait for you there alone, alone. On I read until the day was gone, and I sat in regret of all the things I'd done, of all that I blessed, and all that I'd wronged. On days until my death, I'm alone. In your house, I long to be roam by roam, patiently. I'll wait for you there, like a stone. come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. With your hand, come on with your hand. Come on, come on, come on.
In the words of Pam Beasley, I feel God in this Chili's tonight. Thank you, guys. Don was just leaning over, and he's so true. He said something so true. It is really hard to be that awesome this early in the morning. So great job. Yeah, you guys are awesome. All right. We got a lot of cool stuff happening here at Action Church. If you haven't caught on, I'm going to run through a couple of them. We had a great week this week. We had Dudes Day. The women met for Women's Night, and we actually are bringing back some Action Church swag. I know it's been a minute, but we have a T-shirt sign up. So the way you can sign up for a T-shirt, this is just so we have the right sizing and all that stuff, is you go on the app, click on the Bulletin tab, and it's the first thing there. There's a Google form you can fill out. I'm sure we'll put the link other places. Right now it lives in the app under the Bulletin tab. So we want to get everybody signed up by August 31st for that so that we can get everything ordered for our next series, which Don will talk a little bit about today. But our next series is going to be fantastic. Tonight is Youth Night, and Mike wants me to tell all the youths to bring a board game because you're actually going to do an activity that involves board games. So bring your favorite board game or two, and they're gonna have some fun times for you. Youth Night is great. They have food, they have caffeine in the form of soft drinks. They have games, and then they also take some time to talk about the current series that we're going through. So it's a lot of fun. Next week, do not come here to John Rudy Park because it's the picnic. We have a lot of cool stuff going on. It's in the Wren Pavilion, which if you've been to the picnic before, it's in the same parking lot, essentially. So go to the same spot. The way I would describe it is you drive to the high side of the park, and if you see giant dog parks, you know you're heading in the right direction. We'll have more specific directions on the app, and I'm sure we'll post it on social and all the things. That's from 11 to 1. There's going to be barbecue catered. There's also going to be an ice cream truck. So do not miss the ice cream truck. We need your help. Sign up in the lobby. There's a few spots left for volunteers to help us set up and run some of the activities and stuff. So please, please, please stop by the welcome desk and sign up for the picnic. All right, every week we say it. Invite, invest, and get involved. We cannot do this without you. Action Church just can't happen without people inviting their friends, investing their time and money, and getting involved, showing up to events, showing up for church on Sunday, or the live stream. We need you to be there. So won't you join us? All right. It's week 4. Or week 3, sorry. It's the last week of Facing the Heat. It's usually week 4. Week 3 of Facing the Heat. Don's got some good stuff for us.
Thanks, Mitch, and thank you guys. It's not my birthday, but if it were, that would be what I would want played at my party. And I will tell you, I'm glad that the guys are doing such a great job on the live stream, kind of putting that out there. And I've had people say, like, I can't kind of believe what you guys have pulled off in such a short time, and that's a credit to the team. But you do not get the feel for what we just experienced the last few weeks of the live music, which is a pretty rare thing. It used to be we had live music everywhere, and now it's like I really appreciate, like, wow, we had amazing live music every week, and you're missing that if you're out in your pajamas this morning. Just saying. But we are going to wind up this series called Facing the Heat, and as I say every week, you know, we've talked about this for 3 weeks, but I hope this is sort of just information to you. I hope that your life is smooth. I hope that you never have to stand up for what you believe, that you never really get challenged, but I don't think that's going to be the case. If you're not a Christian this morning, I think this is pretty much a good, informative way of thinking about, like, how would you react if you're challenged, you know, at work or in the marketplace or at your college or in your high school, where you have to stand up and take a stand for something, where you have to decide, like, are you going to stand up for what you believe, or are you going to bow to the pressure? But if you are a Christian, if you're a follower of Christ, this is super important, because this is really, in many ways, one of the most important things that can happen to us as a Christian. We've got a new series coming that I can't wait to tell you about. Like, there's such an ease of entry into Christianity. You know, there's not a big upfront payment and paid the price for our salvation. And yes, you need to get your hair wet and get baptized, but there's not a lot of upfront charges for being a Christian. But at some point, we'll be challenged. At some point, we sort of have to say, am I a follower of Jesus Christ, or am I not? And that often takes the form of one of these challenges in life, where you have to face the heat. And life just seems to lead you to those moments, I will say. There's something about life, and there's something about, like, the way that history works, and the way that just the flow of, you know, day-to-day life works, that at some point it just seems that it leads us to that moment. And that's the moment I want to talk to you about in the life of our heroes this week, of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And it all happened. I want to take you where it started. It happened in a place called Babylon. And Babylon's a real place. Babylon's not something the Bible made up, and it's not a story. It's not a fairy tale. Babylon place, and you could, you know, sort of get a map to it. You could get on your Waze app and just, you know, turn left at Baghdad, Iraq, and just drive out into the desert, and you would find this place called Baghdad. And it's sort of impressive how much of it is still standing. There's impressive walls, impressive buildings, and out of stamped bricks. And when I say stamped bricks, not only were they stamped into the form of bricks, but if you look at the picture on the right-hand side of the screen, and once again, I'm telling you what, you know, Wikipedia says, or what the Museum of Antiquity says. I do not read ancient Babylonian. I'll just let you know that. But I believe what it says on the brick is this brick was forged for, or formed for King Nebuchadnezzar II. If you think Trump likes to put his name on buildings, Nebuchadnezzar put his name on every brick. We believe every brick that was made in Babylon, it had his stamp on. He was pretty proud of what he was doing there. And you see sort of the impressive walls that they built with the reliefs. And it's just amazing. So in the desert, this guy named Nebuchadnezzar built a city. And it's believed that it was the first city to ever have over 200,000 residents. And the idea of 200,000 residents and a life, in the desert, this is not Burning Man. This is like a city, 2,600 years ago. This was New York City of the world. Because King Nebuchadnezzar was, if nothing else, he was very creative, and he was a builder, and he was a guy who had a vision to just sort of not only dominate the world, but build the greatest things in the world. In fact, Babylon, ancient Babylon, this place that we're talking about, was known as one of the 7 wonders of the world. And in fact, we've discovered, or I didn't discover it, but we've discovered, the royal we, in a museum. This is a map of the world according to Babylon. And I don't know, to me it looks like it could be a starfish, but according to what I read about this is a part of a large relief map that was made showing Babylon as the center of the world. Like all of the world sort of radiating around from this great city. And you know what? They weren't wrong. They weren't wrong at the time. At the time, the greatest power in the world, King Nebuchadnezzar and his armies that were just taking over everything, lived in Babylon. And Babylon was the largest city and the most advanced city. And it was the most beautiful place. And so we read in Daniel chapter 1, it starts out like of King Jehoiakim's reign in Judah. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord gave him victory over King Jehoiakim of Judah and permitted him to take some of the objects of the temple. So Nebuchadnezzar took them to the land of Babylonia, and he placed them in the treasure house of his God. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief of staff, to bring to the palace some of the young men of Judah's royal family and other noble families who had been brought to Babylon as captives. Now, what would have freaked them out, and is still strange to think, it says, the Lord gave him victory and allowed him to take their sacred items. Daniel the prophet, Daniel, this young man, is writing, you know what? It was God's plan for Nebuchadnezzar to destroy our country, take our people captive, and like they believed that God, in fact, God said, on earth, I will dwell in this one place. Like now we have the Spirit of God. As Christians, we say we have the Spirit of God within us, and where we meet, whether it's like a converted club or a Chili's, it would work, or we've met in nightclubs and theaters and wherever we meet. Jesus said, wherever 2 or 3 are gathered together, I'm in your midst. That's not the situation they had. They had a building, a very fancy building, and that was where God stayed. And we find Nebuchadnezzar being so powerful, he goes in and goes, hey, I'm going to take some of those articles and I'm going to take them back to my God, Dagon. And we find out something else about Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar, they believe, in fact, from what they've discovered, Nebuchadnezzar, one of his greatest feats might have been that they made at the beat of these, kiln-fired bricks. These kiln-fired bricks, because up until, there had been people who had made bricks like that, but mud bricks are a different thing. Sun-dried mud bricks, you sort of put them out in the sun and they dry, but when rains come, not very often in the desert, or when wind quickly, but Nebuchadnezzar, their society, their civilization, understood how to fire these bricks, where 2,600 years later, we're still able to see one in a museum, and it still has the writing on them. I mean, it has the branding on it. It's like the tag never fell off. I've had tags like that I feel like would last for 2,600 years, and you scrape and they're still there. But this is amazing. But what we find about Nebuchadnezzar, he didn't just build bricks. He didn't just build with bricks. He didn't just go, hey, I'll make these bricks and then I'll turn them into this amazing city. We find that Nebuchadnezzar does something really strange and pretty advanced. He builds with people. He takes, you notice it says he took the most, like, the best people from every land. And he went to Judah and he took the best people from there, the brightest and the young, strong. It says they were even handsome. Like he took the best guys. And he took them back to Babylon, and he sort of incorporated them into his regime. And it says, so Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah were four of the young men, all, and the chief of staff named the Babylon name. Was Belshazzar, and Hananiah was called Shadrach, and Mishael was called Meshach, and Azariah was called Abednego. But Daniel was determined not to defile himself by eating the food and wine given to them by the king, and he asked the chief of staff permission. Except, so we talked about how we'd get the best to send them back. And like I said last week, it was like getting, a free ride scholarship into an Ivy League school. It's really better than that. I think understated, if that's possible, because if you think about it, the alternative is either be killed or live in this country that's destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar. So it was kind of like you either had to live in a place that's been knocked down, like all the defenses have been knocked down and they're paying taxes back to Babylon. You're killed in battle or just killed because it's Tuesday. Or you get a free ride to, School of Babylon, to the Ivy League circuit, and you get to become a ruler of the most powerful place on earth. I mean, it's a pretty big opportunity. And right away, you see sort of like trouble strikes. Because Daniel raises his hand and goes, I can't eat that. And it wasn't just because he had he's on a fitness app or something. It was because of his Jewish faith. He couldn't eat, I don't know what they had. I keep saying it was like the Cheesecake Factory menu. I think that's what Babylon ate, and it sounds delicious, but Daniel was like, no, I can't do that. So, like I said, what happens is immediately conflict strikes, and then it gets worse. Because after they get through that, and we talked about that last week, sort of trusted God and found favor, and it was an amazing story. But then comes this story, where Nebuchadnezzar builds a statue, and this statue's different. He's like, hey, this isn't just great art. You need to worship this. This is a representation of me and my God. And so the next thing that happens is these young men who were part of a country that was overthrown by Nebuchadnezzar, who, won the lottery and were admitted into the Ivy League circuit, got a free ride, now are actually part of the ruling class of Babylon. That's what a big swing their life had taken. It says now Nebuchadnezzar puts a statue up and, by the way, you guys all have to bow. It says, so at the sound of the musical instrument, all the people, whatever their race or nation or language. Notice, once again, it points out, this isn't just they have a few Judean captives. They have people from all over the earth, because this is the center of the earth. This is New York City. This is London. This is Tokyo. This is the center of the earth at that time. And they bowed to the ground and they worshiped the gold statue that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. But some of the astrologers went to the king and informed on the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, long live the king! You issued a decree requiring all people to bow down and worship the gold statue when they hear the sound of the band. I refuse to read that list again. And all other musical instruments. And that decree also states that those who refuse to obey must be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge. Notice, they're in charge of the province of Babylon. And they pay no attention to you, your majesty. They refuse to serve your gods. See, it's not just about bowing. In one sense, you go, what does it matter if I put my body in this position? What if I do a jumping jack? That's bad. Bowing my knee is bad. It's no, that's not the point. The point is at the bottom where it says, they refuse to serve your gods, and they do not worship the gold statue you've set up. It came down to that. It came down to that point for these three guys, even though they'd been rescued from their country. Even though they won the lottery and got picked to go to the Ivy League circuit, even though they'd been promoted to leaders in the greatest city on the earth at that time, life sort of led them to this place, right? This place that happens where all of a sudden now you have a choice. Am I going to bow to the statue, or am I going to honor my God, God of creation and It led them to that point. We've been talking about that point, and today we get to hear sort of the finale, because it says Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you." Right? Like, I do. Really understand. I think you do need to defend yourself, because it's going to get really serious here in a second. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But, and this is the line we talked about, so important. I make it clear to you, your majesty, that we never serve gods or worship statues up. And in this verse, before we move on to the finale of the story, there's two things we have to grasp if we are going to be followers of God, if we're going to be one is rescue us. That is affirming God's power. That's going, you know what? I know this seems like a bad situation, to put it mildly. Like, I know that you have all the power and we have none. I know that, like, everything seems wrong with this idea of us not bowing. But we're just crazy enough to believe that God can rescue us. And that's a big deal. And that's a really, really important step to take in your mind if you're going to be a follower of the God of creation, if you're going to be a follower of his son Jesus and accept the good news of Jesus. That's a step to take. That's a step to take to go, hey, I know that you've got an army and we don't. And I know there's 3 of us and there's like tens of thousands of them out there that are bowing. But I think our odds look good because of God. I think our odds look pretty good. And so we believe in God's power. And so God can totally rescue us. And that's a big step to take. And it's an important step to take. And it's something, it's a leap of faith we have to make if we're going to be followers of God. But I think the next part is even tougher. Because it's one thing to trust God's power. See, trusting God's power sort of takes you to the place where you go, hey, I'm going to do what God says, and he is going to protect me. I am going to be faithful in my giving, and God's going to stretch the rest of my money. If I do that, I trust him. Or I'm going to honor God in my work, and I'm not going to sign off on something that I can't as a Christian, or I'm not going to do what the boss says when it's not ethical, and God will protect my job. But what they said is something even harder. They're like, but even if he doesn't. See, there's trusting God's power, and that's important. But they went beyond that. Like, they trusted God's plan. See, trusting God's plan is different, because if you think about it from their perspective, they had experienced God's power. There's no doubt about it. They experienced God's power when they won the lottery and got brought to Babylon and then got put in, like they're thinking like they're going to work in a brick factory, but instead they're entered into Ivy League education for the time, and they become like senators they become the mayor of, they become leaders and rulers in Babylon. I mean, so they had experienced God's power. But don't forget, they'd also experienced God's plan. Don't forget, like, they were perfectly happy being nice Judean boys living in Judah, going to the temple, and they had seen a foreign king come in and destroy that. And he didn't destroy the temple at that point, but we find later in their life, they actually saw their temple, the place where God lived, knocked down. Emptied, totally ravaged by Nebuchadnezzar's army. So they'd experienced part of God's plan, which is God doesn't always do what we think. Like, it's one thing to go like, I trust God and my team will always win, and then your team suffers a terrible defeat. That's why you shouldn't trust God to help your team win. Like, remember I prayed for the basketball player 2 weeks ago? Still on injured reserve. So we have to trust God's plan as well as his power if we're going to truly trust God. And so remember I told you about those bricks. See, here's the thing, like, It's easy to read the story, and it's funny, like I've seen people say this, like, there's no oven that you can throw men into, like, because they think of like smelting ovens for steel or for gold or whatever for metals, which is true. Like, they built that giant golden statue, and it wasn't built in kilns or ovens that were big enough to put people in. It would just take too much energy. There's no way that would work. The science isn't there. Forget, this is the land of a million. We've already ruined many giant ovens. Giant ovens, which brick oven pizza seem a little now, doesn't it? Do you think of it? But where or slide these large pallets of bricks in there. Like they had a system to make billions of bricks. You got to have a lot of bricks, but you also have a lot of ovens. Where he's to an oven, them, and they believe this is not a Babylon, but this type of oven is what you would see. You would see a giant, like a structure that would just literally be filled with fire and bricks in there drying out and being fired. And so how we still have those bricks is because they were very efficient and they were very hot and they had plenty of them. And so when Nebuchadnezzar makes his threat, he's not just saying that. And these guys who trusted God's power and his plan were probably staring at the oven while they did it, like going, oh yeah, right over there, I see the fire. So it says Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. I mean, who tells this guy no? Right? I mean, think about, like, this is the guy who rules the world. This is the guy who conquers everything. This is the guy, really impressive, who is building these giant things, who's built the greatest city on the earth at that time. Going to do it. He's already knocked down the to get there. So his came distorted with rage, and he commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Now that's sort of hyperbole, like, I don't know. It's not like, oh, well, but you know, it was like, we're bricks, fire this thing up as much as we can. So they 7 times hotter than usual. And then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. This detail is interesting to think about. How do you get someone of it? You can't march them in, you know, okay, ready to go, and we're going on 3, we're going on 1. Like, you have to throw someone into the oven. And so even this detail in Scripture is like, oh, yeah, you would have to, like, make them go. And this is probably, I believe, a brick kiln. So it's a walk-in thing. It's not like it's some sort of torture device. It's where they roll or scoot these large things of bricks in and stack them up and then fire them. So they have to, this is a terrible job. Like, this is a job you don't want. Like, take these guys into the oven that's hotter than ever and throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up and they threw them in the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. Once again, a detail on. They're just throwing them in. Next is no rescue. The guys who said, we believe God can rescue us, but even if he doesn't, got thrown into the furnace. And I can't imagine, like, everyone knew that was going on, but it had to seem like, wow, what a waste. What a terrible choice. Like, you are in charge of Babylon. Like, there's a million rationalizations you guys can make, and I can make for them, right? Like, all they have to do is bow their knees to the statue, and then they're in charge, and they can't make a difference if they're in the furnace. I mean, we hear politicians say this, like, I have to do what I have to do to get into power, and they're not going to make a difference. Well, that's what they could have said, but they didn't. They're like, okay, throw us in. So the story continues. And it says, and because the king in his anger had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers that threw the men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up these 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" And they're like, "Yes, we did, Your Majesty." This is kind of an interesting point, isn't it? Like, it was so hot, like in his anger. Like, the soldiers that threw them in were killed. And you know, I'm sure they were fine fellows with nice families. So I'm not going to take a lot of pleasure in that. But I mean, think about that, like that blowback that happens. Like, if we're honest, if you've ever put in a situation like I have been where, you know, you're sort of wronged, and because you take a stand, you're harmed for it, and because like you're trying to do the right thing, you get all sorts of grief. What would you like more than anything? Not just to be rescued, but wouldn't you like the people that put you in that position? Wouldn't you like the people that harmed you to get a little taste of their, oh man, that's what happens here, right? Like literally everyone who throws them into the fire, they're killed. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Wait a minute. I see 4 men unbound." Well, yes, they're unbound. Those ropes are not going very well. Walking around unharmed. Fourth God. Trans the God angel. That's Jesus. Because all of you go, I don't know the Testament. I like when Jesus shows up. Jesus would tell you he was there the whole time. He said, "In the beginning, I am." It says, then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could for the furnace. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the high God, and come. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. The high officers and officials and governors and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. This is a great detail and what we would love to happen in this situation. Not only people that try us for thing be blow back, my hair was and clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell the smoke. See, there's that line in there where it says, "I don't see 3 men, I see 4." And whether it's Jesus or an angel or from God, or like, is the most satisfying thing to imagine. Like that, he act, step up, even if I have to go through this, I will. And then Jesus shows up. I mean, that's all that a Christian could hope for. Like, if I follow Christ, and if I do this difficult thing, if I refuse to bow down, then I will be met. Jesus is so powerful. But realize we're in the fire and not from the fire. And that's important to realize, because I think that's a real life thing that you're going to face should you go through something where you have to stand up, where you have to face the heat. Jesus shows up. Jesus shows up, and you know, I'm a firm believer. I believe that God can rescue. Even if he doesn't, I trust his plan, but God can rescue. But he doesn't, like, he didn't show up before they were thrown into the fire. And that's important to realize. Like, I don't know how hot it was. Obviously, it wasn't hot enough to burn anything. But I don't know at what point that kicked in. Like, there had to be a moment that they're walking forward toward the fire, and they can feel, like, you've done that with a campfire or one of Steve's bonfire before the cops come. Like, you start to walk forward, you're like, I can't get any closer because my face is going to catch. Well, they had to feel that at some point, and then they're thrown into the fire, and that's when Jesus chooses to show up, and that's when Nebuchadnezzar, you notice he doesn't call him guys, hey, governor, and you know, he's like servants of the Most High God. They're not his servants anymore. Like, he is convinced. Nebuchadnezzar is a believer at that point. So it says, Nebuchadnezzar says, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him. And they defied the king to die rather than serve on God. I make," this is so bad, so Nebuchadnezzar. He said, "I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race or nation or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, will be heaps of rubble. Won't do it into the furnace. There is who can rescue like this. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. And I love the words that he said. The unconvinced ruler of the world said, there's no God that could rescue like this. And in fact, if you remember on week 1, we talked about what did Nebuchadnezzar say? He said, if you don't obey, what God can rescue? Well, here's your answer, and it's from his own words. He's like, hey, this God can. And that's the God, if you're a Christian this morning, that you and I depend on. The same God. But here's something I want you to think about. Put yourself in their shoes for a moment. I've been trying to get you there, but just think one more time. Like, they were kidnapped from their country. They watched this overwhelming power come in and just destroy it. They win the lottery. They're moved to the greatest nation on earth and the greatest time for that nation and in the greatest city that had ever existed up to that point. And they're promoted. They're sent away to like Ivy League schools and given the best of everything and promoted to leadership positions, and then they sort of throw it all away, quote, quote, because they refuse to worship the God of Nebuchadnezzar. Well, what does it take to do that? It's a lot. But here's something you and I know that they did not know. That brick, the one that Nebuchadnezzar made billions of, the one he thought was the one that he stamped, he had folks for that. It's in a saved a still ruins. Nobody's living in Babylon. And you know that map? That map that points out that like Babylon the Great, they call it Babylon the Great, is the center of the world. Everything radiates out from that map, or maybe it's a picture of a starfish. But that's what they say that map says. It's in a museum. Because nobody thinks Babylon is the center of the world. But we're still talking about this story, aren't we? And as Christians, we're still serving the same God, because after, oh man, you know what? You know what happened to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and Daniel? They were still leading the country when another guy came called Darius the Mede and destroyed Babylon. Can you imagine? Like, he destroyed the great and became even greater. And then they passed on, and after that, there was the Greeks, and they were the greatest, they were the smartest, they were the most advanced. And then the Roman Empire came, and they were so powerful, they're like, when God sent his son, well, we'll take care of that, won't we? But here we are today. And I want to read to you what Paul wrote to Timothy in closing. I want the guys to come back up and play another great song. He said, this is a trustworthy saying. If we die with him, we will also live with him. It's not over when we die. If we endure hardship, we will reign with him. If we deny him, this is where it's very important about this facing the heat and standing up. If we deny him, he will deny us. And if we're unfaithful, he remains faithful. For he cannot deny who he is. See, here's what I know. Just looking into the future. If Christ doesn't return, someday, New York City's going to be, some part of New York City is going to be in a museum. It's going to be, oh, look at this. This is a Wall Street sign. Oh, it wasn't about the walls. That's where their finance center was. And look at this thing. It was called an iPhone. How cute is that? And you see this bull statue? They didn't worship it. Well, actually, they did worship it because it represented their market. And maybe it'll be the Statue of Liberty's hands like in Planet of the Apes. We'll save some little part and they'll go, that was that great civilization called the United States, or it was called, because we will not last forever. I guarantee you that. But here's what I'm putting my hope that does. This is a trustworthy thing. If we die with him, we will live with him. If we endure hardship, we will reign with him. If we deny him, he will deny us. But if we are unfaithful, he remains faithful. He cannot deny who he is. Let's pray. Dear God, we're so grateful for the opportunity to serve you. And God, it's scary to think about, like, are we ready to face the heat? When the time comes. God, give us the strength to never deny you. God, help us to face hardship so that we can reign with you. But most of all, God, we count on your faithfulness. And God, help us to be a people that don't just believe in your power, sort of head knowledge of, oh, God can do anything. But we actually trust your plan when things do not go the way we hope. God, we honor you and we thank you for the gift of Jesus. In your name we pray. Amen.
The original fire is died and gone, but the right inside moves on. The original fire is died and gone, moves on. The original fire is died and gone, the right inside moves on. The original fire is died and gone, the right inside moves on. With a pen in one hand, taking a stand on LSD. LD8 and 5 could show us something to believe. Right or wrong, with the dirty hands on wires, singing a song with discord choirs, screaming a prayer, don't tell, show us something that couldn't be real. The fire is died and gone, the right side moves on. The original fire is died and gone, the right side moves on. Golden soldiers born much shorter than they'll live to be. Lived inside a sea of hands in a long forgotten city. Going down in rains hereafter, going down in drifting rafters. Blood and rushing to your head is laughter. Endlessly, the original fire is died and gone. The right inside moves on. The original fire is died and gone. The right inside moves on. Can't explain it, it was something to see. Can't contain it, it was ever real. Ever real. Can't explain it, it was something to see. Can't contain it, it was ever real. Ever real. The original fire is died and gone. The right inside moves on. The original fire is died and gone. The right inside moves on. The original fire is died and gone. The right inside moves on.
Thank you, guys. What a great job. And I'm so glad you guys came out. Let your friends know. We're going to the park next week. And then Action Church, remind them we're open for business. And we want you to be part of it next month. We're starting a brand new series called No Experience Required. And we're going to invite you to be part of this movement that's been going on since Nebuchadnezzar's time, long before that, and long after we're gone if Christ doesn't return. And we want to tell you very simply how to be part of that. And we're going to invite people to join in and get their hair wet in September, and baptized, and join into something far older than Action Church called The Church. So see you next week at the park, and then let's invite everyone. We are open for business. Thank you guys so much. Have a great week.